It's the Indie Review Show.
It's crazy. I can't believe it. And the neat thing about that typewriter is I noticed it starts kind of making a little beat like toward the end. So it makes me all pumped. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I feel like I'm at like some weird German house dance party. It's like
I actually am using this as I'm going to launch my new album that I do just with old school typewriters.
You know, I think I'm trying to think. But that's great. That's a great idea to use typewriters
as like Stomp a beat in the 90s.
I feel like I think Bjork did that. I think she actually. Well, she didn't do it, but whoever produced one of the
right.
Yeah, but it was cool. Yeah. All right, what do we got?
I am excited for today's show because we are going to do. We're going to do it a little bit differently. So if you've seen past episodes. We kind of just go page by page through the story and talk about things that kind of jumped out to us. And there's a format to it. This book, I feel like the story isn't necessarily why you would read the book. And so instead of going through page by page, we're going to try a different format where we're going to specifically talk about, where's my notes, architecture and dream incorporation as foreshadowing. In other words, I'm going to talk about like how Sean Gordon Murphy, who does the pencils and inks on this, structured the visuals in such a way that it leads you through the story, but it also leads you physically through space, and time gets compressed and expanded based on different things that are happening. And so it'll be a little bit more of a craft situation today than just like what I've done in the past, which is like, I love it. Look at it. It's neat. It's a good story and good art. And so hopefully everybody enjoys that. But hi to everybody who's here. So we got a few people with us so far. And before we jump in, Josh, do you want to? I'll start and then we'll switch over. Okay. So if you want to see my stuff, you can go to coreykerr.com. And I've got animations and stuff that are going up in different places like Instagram and YouTube and whatnot. And so you guys can always check those out. And if you go to coreykerr.com and click on what's new, then that'll take you to kind of the newest stuff.
Sounds good. And for anybody who might be tuning in for the first time too, I want to let them know this is the series where we review the best of indie comics and other media like movies, TV, cartoons, books, and did we mention comics? And we're pulling back the curtains on our inspirations. We've been professional illustrators, cartoonists, animators, graphic designers, and taught at the college level, teach at the college level. And as Corey mentioned, that's one of the things that inspires him. And so that's kind of the premise of this show. We're going to just get into the things that inspire us. You can find my work at...
I have that up in front of me right now. I completely forgot.
I was waiting for the cue, and I'm like, oh... So he's Corey Kerr, and then I'm Joshua Kimball, and you can get my work at you can get my book, Two Stories, my graphic novel about faith and mental illness, from Amazon at a reduced rate. And aside from that, I'm really excited about getting into this review today. Oh, and I will say also, you can get it at most comic book shops, especially indie-friendly bookstores and stuff like that. It's 122 pages, very nice. And with all that being said, I'm really eager to dive into the work and kind of get into the structure and see what exactly about this book Corey is so in love with. And also, I forgot to mention, another premise of this show is I have not read this book. And so Corey's job throughout this, not only to get into the aesthetics and all that fun stuff, but it's to convince me to want to buy it. So that'll be fun. All right. Are you all good, Corey?
Yeah, I'm good to go. I'm just going to throw my headphones on, but let's do it.
Perfect. All right. Let's pop this up there. And now we got this nice view of the book.
Okay. So Grant Morrison wrote this, and Sean Gordon Murphy did pencils and inks on it. The colors are also fantastic by Dave Stewart. Todd Klein, who I'm not super familiar with, is the letterer on this, but really, really, really fantastic lettering in some of these scenes. One of those situations where you can almost like hear the voice of the letterer kind of as you're going. So
Awesome. Jim in the chat said this is one of the SGM. I'm imagining that's for Sean Gordon Murphy books I'm missing, and I can't wait to hear the review. And then Jim Lujan was telling you and advising you to sell the book like the My Pillow guy.
I am aware of that guy, but not enough to mimic him. So anyway, so this is a Vertigo comic, and I'll speed through the beginning so everybody kind of understands what's going on. So this is Joe and his mom. They're driving. They're going to some sort of kind of get together field trip situation. She reminds him to make sure to eat his candy bar and pack it. He packs a snack and don't forget it, because he is very, very diabetic and goes into hypoglycemic shock if he doesn't keep his blood sugars up. And then we see kind of this shot, which is just incredibly beautiful when it comes to like the layout and everything. And this is just like classic Sean Gordon Murphy, where it's like unnecessarily amazing for like what it is and just the ambience of it. And so we got this kind of like multiple tiered kind of situation, and he says, "Hey Dad, you suck." And so and we'll see this kind of iconography of like the cemetery and things. What I want to go over today is I want to go over to how it's called dream incorporation, and how what they're using as a storytelling device is that things in Joe's reality, his real life, are kind of incorporated into this kind of like diabetic coma that he slips into. And so his dream and reality start to mix, and he begins hallucinating and having trouble kind of differentiating fact from fiction, basically. And so it kind of starts with this situation. And what I have several Sean Gordon Murphy original pages, and what he is known for is just really energetic and amazing inks.
Can I throw this out there too? It's weird, but like that page you just went through reminds me like heavily of Chris Bichello, like the artist who did Death, the High Cost of Living. It's like a really like, I wonder, I guess I'll have to look into that, but I wonder if Sean Gordon Murphy's like inspired by that, because it looks a lot like that, or like the work on like Generation X. Like it's really interesting, but like the way he stylizes faces and approaches his inks, it's an interesting thing, but it's really cool. To see.
He has quite a few influences. I haven't heard him mention that guy, but he talks about Sergio Tappi quite a bit, and you can see Sergio Tappi's kind of influence in the trees and in the leaves.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, like Pacelli definitely could be. I'm not certain, one way or the other there. But I mean, even down, I don't know how well people can see this, but even down to like lettering, like the carved letters of the Portland Cemetery there. I mean, there's just, it's like it's a ton of detail, but not in a way that really gets like lost or so busy that it's just a wash with things. But it's also not like simplistic. And so anyway, just the control of his contrast between kind of areas of complexity and simplicity just blows me away. So we'll kind of speed through this part. So we have some bullies that kind of are picking on Joe, and he's about to eat his candy bar, and they steal it from him. And, he's having a rough time, but he forgets to eat because they kind of stole his food, and then he goes through the rest of the day without eating. And this is the beginning where we're kind of introduced to his house. It's an old school house, and there's a couple things about this page that I think uses foreshadowing in a really, really cool way. So one is, you can see in this curve that this is a very tall house. And so this is what people would call a partially exposed basement, where on this half of the street, it would be a basement, but on this side of the street, it would be considered like a third story. And so it's a very old school house. You'll also see that there are skylights up here on the roof, and there's a chimney. And we start to get introduced to the idea of stairs and even like the zebra style crossing and the one way. This is kind of like an inverted Bruce Lee film where instead of like fighting things going up a level at a time, he's descending a level at a time.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so you get this kind of initial idea. And then I just love the idea of like the little bit of drifting smoke kind of leading us off into the distance.
Yeah.
And what you'll see in the background is a gathering storm that continues to get worse and worse and worse over the next few pages. And so right now we're just getting the idea of dark clouds. And so we kind of see them gather and then they start to get a little bit worse here. What were you going to say?
That top panel on the left too, you're mentioning that there's like kind of a theme of like stairs, and it's just interesting because it's kind of like creating almost like steps as well with the way that the shadows are being cast, like the lighting situation that he set up in the bus. And honestly, that's just such a striking way to do a shot on a school bus.
Right.
It's just super fascinating to me, that top panel where it's just it's almost like a fisheye lens perspective, so you can get like a close up. But it's interesting you're mentioning stairs are a theme, because I definitely see that. Like there's that's really cool. The way that's incorporated.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because you have this descending staircase and then a landing, and then he actually physically leaves the bus on stairs.
That's so cool.
And so you get this idea, and you'll see this staircase, and again, the bus has this vanishing perspective going on, and it leads us into this one way, and then we see the bus leave, and this leads us into this staircase as he starts to step up into his house.
I love it.
And this is where we begin to use. I think this is just incredibly fascinating. From what I understand, the script was a little bit sparse, and Murphy came up with a lot of this to try to like make it work. And you'll see him, he enters in through the house. And so the continuity of this, we see him leave the bus, we see him enter in through the front door. The thing that I find amazing to me is that all of this architecture makes sense as if this was shot with a camera in a physical structure. And so he walks into the kitchen, and you see kind of the same like lighting situation, and he walks past. And so we start to see kind of foreshadowing of things. So there's a lot of like railing and descending stairs into the basement as he walks by the basement. And we see very long hallway as he's left the front door open, and we begin to see that the rain has started. And so as we kind of have progressed, we've seen the storm clouds gather, the rain starts. Over here, we see lightning, but it's a big house, and it's an old house. And so we see him kind of walk in, we see him walk past multiple rooms, the introduction of the basement. One of my favorite things that Sean does is he leaves his fingerprint in the inks. So you can see like in the shadows there that he's got his fingerprint as a little bit of texture. He uses a lot of like non-traditional tools to do inks, like razor blades and fingerprints and things like that. So a little bit beyond that type of thing, and then a little zip tone, things like that. But in here we have, so we've got kind of the vintage architecture. We see the ascending staircase, and we see family photos. And so kind of we're starting to get a feel that this is like a very lived in home. And we know that his dad is dead, and we see that it's kind of incorporated. We get the feeling that that might be a little bit recent. And then this situation here, I think is just beautiful, because what you have is on the top, this gathering storm, and it's bookended by this chessboard at the bottom. And so we have this kind of like bookend of like chaos and strategy. And in the middle of this, again, are these staircases that are kind of leading us here. Another little interesting thing that happens that I find just incredibly well done is that he drops his bag here, and his bag stays there, and we see it like as kind of like a mile marker or a signpost of his progress when the story starts to pick up.
I'm sorry, that's just a beautiful page. Like the whole structure, that the way that he has the panels sort of flow into each other. He's giving you every bit of information you need, but in this very stylized, beautiful way, and leading your eye very smoothly through that page with that staircase, just making a cool, like, kind of lightning bolt coming from the storm. That's amazing. That's just a really, and I will definitely quote Ox on that. He said, "What a trip! I'm halfway through it, but those inks." And then he said, "Darn those inks!" Which,
Right.
and then Jim was saying, "Amazing page." Yeah, this is like, I think that's why I thought of Bocello, because he just had that's amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I like that you bring up the lightning, because you'll see a lot of that repetition where he introduces a symbol of something and that symbol repeats kind of in in the layout of the page as well. And so we have like lightning bolts introduced here, and then we have this lightning page. Even the staircase like zigs back in an additional panel, and so we get this different shot.
Oh, you know what kills me, Corey? Like, look at the page on the left. I just saw this, but on the left, there's a lightning bolt being created by that the counter in the kitchen.
Oh, right,
leading. Yeah. So I mean, this is just and
you can see that this edge of this table continues on into the shadow of the next thing, which matches up with the door.
That just kills me. I mean, that's, oh man, that spread, that layout. Oh,
when I say that Sean Gordon Murphy is a master of composition, I'm really not exaggerating. I know that the word master gets kind of like tossed around a lot, but he is incredibly good at laying things out.
Oh man.
And so we've kind of gone through the process here of traveling up, right? And this is really quite fascinating here, because remember how I pointed out the skylights that we saw before? Here are those skylights again, and the way that he does this particular page is really, really interesting, because what he's trying to show is he's working really, really hard to make sure that we understand the setting that Joe is in.
Yeah.
And so he walks through the hallway. We see the ladder hanging down the hallway. We see the bathroom over here in its kind of own little separate panel. And so we're getting these kind of little cutouts and little cutaways. And then he climbs this ladder. And normally this wouldn't work, because his motion is leading, like, it's antithetical to the way that the flow of it goes. Like, normally we would expect the character to be going down. But because it's established so well here, we understand that he's climbed up into this floor space down here.
Yeah.
And then we get this just kind of reverse establishing shot, which really is kind of a callback to the beginning, where it's like, remember the chimney and remember the skylights?
Yeah.
We're at the top of the house in the attic.
This is I don't know, like a textbook in how to set up an establishing environment, you know?
Yeah. And that's the only thing that I want to talk about today, is just how we're foreshadowing and then repeating. So there's establishing shots and then callbacks to establishing shots, so that we get the idea of that. And even in this panel, we're reinforcing, like, he's in the attic. Remember this tall house that we saw before with the skylights? That's where he is. That's where we are right now.
And now it's really pouring rain. Yeah.
It's really pouring. And we have carrion birds that are introduced. So we've got the crows and the ravens, and the crows and the ravens. So, I mean, there's all kinds of symbolism here. And we're introduced to one of our main characters, Jack, who is his rat, who lives in this little cage next to his bunk bed. So again, stairs. It's not even that he's in the attic. He's in the attic and climbs a ladder to get into his bed. So, this continuing, like, ascent, right?
Yeah.
And then the camera angle is looking down at the bed, so we get a kind of a shot of that. And then the camera angle shifts a little bit to a mid shot, and then the camera angle shifts again so that we're looking up.
And then, like, again, just his inks too, like that ink texture to establish just rain falling is so good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so like loose where it needs to be loose and tight where, just
Right.
wow. Sorry.
Yeah. No, he
I'm
is.
geeking out over this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we'll cover a couple Sean Gordon Murphy books, and it's you geek out every time. But I love the idea of the skylights, and then we look up through the skylights, and then we even zoom in so that we see the lightning on his kind of lighting his face. And the colorist here, Dave Stewart, just does a great job of just kind of like brightening it up just a little bit, so we see that kind of that reflection.
Okay, and then I want to highlight the fact, because I was really astounded by the color, and I'm not shocked that it's Dave Stewart, because he's easily one of the best colorists in the industry. And for anybody curious, we did a thing on the Screw-On Head, the amazing Screw-On Head, and that was Dave Stewart as well, who works on most of like Hellboy as well. So if those colors, the palette and the muted tones seem kind of remarkably familiar, it's like it's he's one of the best colorists in the industry. That makes me even more excited. Whew.
Yeah, and what I love about colorists like Dave Stewart is you can't put it ruins if you've got an inker like Mignola or Murphy. You want the inks to really sing. A lot of colorists will go in and they do their thing in such a way that it kind of like blasts the inks. And there's a lot of actually people that argue that the colorists are kind of like saving kind of lazy composition and whatever. But like in a case like this, you want desaturated colors. You want kind of very subtle coloring because the inks really need to stand out.
Gary Hodges said it has the vibe of the last chunk of Lady Killer too, which, by the way, if you guys are curious, you should also see our review of Lady Killer on Indie Review Show, irsagency.com.
Absolutely. Another one of my favorite books. So we cut to inside of the cage, and this is one of those things that I find kind of like Wally Wood's 22 panels. It's like, how many different angles can we show this same semi-boring room?
Yeah.
And so he changes cameras to like, let's showcase Jack the Rat here. He starts to hallucinate, and we start to get like this like ominous monochromatic kind of blue scary hallway situation. We go back to the rat, and there's kind of like the reverse shot that the Coens do to kind of like establish things, and then everything just starts warping. And so you see his bedspread, which is kind of this patchwork quilt. It starts to warp, and I love that we're seeing all of the things stay the same. And so when he comes into this room, there's a poster that is of space up here, and we see that poster again down there, and that becomes very interesting as it warps into this kind of like hallucination that he begins to have because he's now slipping into a diabetic coma. So then we get this kind of burst of that poster is now the reality that he's experiencing. And so you have that same poster is now, it becomes this expansive landscape. He starts to flash back and forth. And so since we're not doing like page by page in the story, I'm going to kind of flip ahead here just to kind of establish what's going on. So we've had kind of a lot of those foreshadowing of like the staircase and everything else. There's another callback that we'll get to in a minute here, but he drops his pen. He writes himself a little note that says danger hypo, because he starts to realize that he's beginning to hallucinate. And then he sees Snake Eyes and Optimus Prime.
Oh, man.
And so what you'll notice if you flip back, which I won't do right now, but I'll show you the next page, is that all of these toys, you've got the Warthog from Halo, you've got Green Army soldiers, you've got a detective, you've got teddy bears, you've got a one-legged Jean-Luc Picard, Transformer, Batman, the Shadow, Snake Eyes, these Robin, a Triceratops. These are all toys that were scattered about his room on the ground. And if you look back and forth, you'll actually see in this shot down here that even though the camera angle changes, the way he is perceiving them, they're in the exact same spot, just in a more dramatic angle.
I love it.
And so, because it's DC and Vertigo, they've got access to some of these characters. But we come here and we see, here's the Warthog from Halo, and here's the Detective, and here's Jean-Luc Picard and the Transformers and Superman, and Lobo here and the Triceratops. And so they're all kind of laid out like that. And now he has fallen out of bed, and I love the kind of like trailing quilt to make sure that we understand, like, he fell out. And we see him jumping back and forth between kind of reality and hallucination here.
This is amazing.
So then Jean-Luc Picard kind of talks to him for a bit, gives him his phaser. They all bow down to him, calling him the dying boy. There's some sort of prophecy that they're all aware of. And then we just have incredibly intricate splash pages like this, which kind of aren't part of what we're talking about today, but you still get the zigzag Z pattern lightning bolt.
Yeah.
And staircases everywhere.
And then also it just shows you the skill of Dave Stewart too as a colorist, because he's been he another really key reason to mute, especially if you're talking about like a diabetic, like seeing things because of a diabetic coma. It's like, I've had friends who have pretty severe diabetes, and they always talk about just the really saturated, crazy color they see. Yeah. And so I think it's really cool that it goes from like these muted tones to just like, that's an explosion of color there. And the neat thing is it's still using a lot of like, neutral tones, but then like, and desaturated color, but then just a little bit of amped up saturation, and then doing a lot of analogous colors and complementary colors. It's like, it just makes it explode with color. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Also, just the art's amazing. But yeah, that's awesome.
Right. So when you're talking about color on this, you had mentioned this, but the hue contrast of color temperature.
Yeah.
When you have orange, you'll put blue there, and then you'll put orange here. Right. It goes warm, cool,
so
and you do that enough, and it just starts to kind of bounce up. So we'll kind of speed past this. He meets this rat warrior in a cage, and that's obviously his pet. His pet Jack. So Jack here is this fingerless gloved warrior guy that kills these guys, and we're going to jump through this part.
So cool.
And then we see him fall, and when he actually falls, just like in a dream, he actually falls. And so here's the ladder again. And so when they're falling, he's falling. And so this is kind of that idea of dream incorporation. Dream incorporation is the concept of if you hear an alarm clock and your body doesn't want to wake up, then your body will incorporate the alarm clock into your dream so it doesn't startle you awake. And so when he falls, he falls. And now
we're starting to see the stair theme too, because it's like, right. Okay, he's down one level.
Yeah. So now
I love where this is going.
Right. So now he's down one level, and look at this page on the left here, just the panel layout. They begin to when he hits, the panels compress and overlap. And then when there's a rest, there's a gap. And then when there's a transition, there's a bigger overlap. And so this little gap and this little rest. And so we get this idea of like, okay, there's the staircase again. We've got the ladder fall. We've got the compression, almost like, when you hit something in your spine or whatever, kind of just feels that impact. And we're looking down at him. But I love the continuity between, like, we see kind of like a Jackie Chan style editing where they rewind a little bit and we see the impact twice in a second.
Yeah.
And so they're falling, they hit, we turn the page, we hit again, we get that compression. The stairs are introduced. We see the ladder kind of falling down. Again, crazy colors in the dreamscape and desaturated colors in reality. And you can really tell just between these two panels. The colors of his jacket show up in the trees and stuff, but they're hyper vibrant.
And I love those like feather leaf things, like kind of flying to kind of it's sort of showing you that he's still in the illusion, like, but
Right.
we're seeing him. Yeah. I mean, this is, and also that Z pattern lightning bolt thing is just continually throughout this whole thing. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he has knocked over this plant, but the plant is like dead kind of stick decoration.
Yeah.
But then you're right. He is hallucinating. And so we're seeing his reality and his hallucination in this transition panel.
So good.
And then here we have the first real kind of introduction of a staircase kind of in the dreamscape. All right, so we'll kind of skip ahead here. This page doesn't really have anything to do with what I wanted to talk about, but I really wanted to talk about this line. Might be the best line in any comic ever, because he basically opens this window to a lightning bolt and hallucinates that there's this giant flaming skull named Lord Ark yelling at him what the rules are, and just excellent lettering work here. And then he is in a hypoglycemic coma, and he's actually in a land called Hypogea. But right here, it says, the journey arduous, companions on the way, etc. Traditional rules apply. It's like, it's, I just love the nod to like, yeah, we know that this has been done a million times, like the whole quest idea. And you'll actually see like some pretty funny analogies to like the hero's journey and stuff, kind of as he's literally descending into hell. And before he gets into the basement, like there's a dog Cerebus that's like guarding, and there's little nods. He gets waylaid at a little station at one point in time by the fireplace where he's warm and cozy and forgets. It's not like a shot by shot ripoff of the Odyssey, but there's these little nods to like, and I love that they're just saying, we're going to play with this idea here, traditional rules apply. So,
Gary said, I was just about to say this has a whiff of Oz. And then also just referring to that spread we looked at with the crazy colors. He said the colorist's stomach had to drop when he got the spread.
Right.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So we have this conversation, his rat companion, Jack, the warrior rat.
I'm sorry. This one might take a while because it's just honestly such cool art that I think we're gonna have to comment a little more on it. But it's like the eyes being crossed is just such a funny. Like I love that the skull looks bored. Like right. I like even his expression on the left. That's just such a nice artist choice and really highlights like his kind of like, well, the drill kind of thing. Like
right.
it's great. I just love it. How he kind of, for an ominous skull laying out the journey, he seems pretty bored with the
right. And this is also, and so you notice the crosses they've been showing up for the last couple pages. Like we get that kind of incorporation of the earlier event in the day where he was visiting his dad's grave, and then we start to see these descending staircases. Here is a rope bridge. He came down in reality a rope ladder. We see the descending staircase. We get a shot up this staircase so we can kind of see what's going on. They kind of test out some weapons. They have kind of, again, a gondola cage situation to kind of lower on the ropes. And this is the part that I actually wanted to cover kind of in depth. He goes back to reality. He's talking to himself, and he realizes that he is not doing well. Vomits in the toilet, and then just like you can almost only do in a comic, this idea of like it's very easy to tell when he's hallucinating and when he's not. Right?
Yeah,
and most of that's color, but also like the panel border here is exceptionally thick, compared to kind of the rest of it. So we now know that he's in the bathroom because 20 pages earlier, we saw the shot of the toilet. And so we know that he has made it only about 10 feet. And the interesting thing is about that compression of space and time that I mentioned is that his dream sequences, his hallucinations, they expand and go on for quite a ways when he's making very minimal progress through the house.
I mean, the whole concept is so selling me because it's like it's a hero's journey to get to the bottom floor of a house,
right? So that he can get
and
a soda out of the fridge,
and it's expanded to this epic quest. I mean, that's so amazing. Just what a good concept in the art. Yeah. Anyhow, sorry. Keep
right?
going.
And so, Jack says, "Oh, you scared of heights? No problem. It's claustrophobia for me." He vomits in the toilet. Notice the color change here between like. He's also just looking a lot paler and starting to look really sick. We get a shot of him rinsing his head off in this giant drainage pipe. And then we get the juxtaposition of reality. What he's actually doing is he turned on the bathtub. And so quite a bit of time has passed here. He's not doing well. He's not moving quickly. We see the bathtub is empty. He turns on the water to kind of wake himself up. And it's quite full at this point. And then we see that the world has begun to fill up to the point where we now have submersible pirates that are starting to show up in this as the entire hallucination world begins to fill up with water.
And then I love that you could literally draw the same. It's like a backwards S. It's a Z basically. You could draw the same kind of arced Z on every single page for the flow of the main character's position. Like these are just very expertly drawn.
So then we get the idea of the water. They go down into the submersible. We'll kind of skip ahead here a little bit.
Wait. Sorry, I got to see that pirate.
Okay, so
that captain. That's amazing. Look at that.
The funny thing is the pirates are all dwarves except for the pirate king's son, who thinks he's a giant but is actually just a normal sized person, and they play off of that quite a bit. So they go into the kind of the land in the pipes.
Wow.
And so they have this big adventure. We'll kind of skip past all this because this is irrelevant to the stairs, which is kind of what we're talking about today.
Oh, Ox also said he was dipping out because he doesn't want the spoilers. So Ox, hop on after and let us know what you thought of the book and whether we did a decent job.
Okay, so now we have kind of a Venice situation, a world kind of in underwater, not underwater, but beginning to fill, right? And so we meet one of the companions that we're told we'll meet. We get a shot of kind of this situation that looks very like bathroom drain like, kind of in the walls, and we see. I love this little like fire escape, New York fire escape style staircase again. Just to kind of reinforce that. I'll kind of skip ahead here. And so quite a bit happens, and we're still in the bathroom. And so we jump back and we see that he's looking at himself in the mirror, and he's like, it's from thousands of years ago because he just saw this big mosaic that was created of the dying boy that was from the prophet, and it cuts back, and then we cut into the shot of like the water still filling up the tub. And we start to see that it's dripping on the floor and the rug is getting wet and we've got drips and we have Jack the Rat kind of watching this rubber duck. And then we cut to Jack and Joe having a conversation and they're now almost completely underwater. Here's a door that is like halfway exposed. And so you see the water level rising slowly as the water level is rising slowly. Again, Z pattern.
I love this too, and obviously it harkens a little bit to Little Nemo and Slumberland too, with the whole dream sequences in comics, and I think we brought up when we were reviewing that like how perfect this medium is for depicting dream logic. This is just an expert example of that.
Yeah, and I like even the call outs to Little Nemo. I don't know how intentional they were of like the falling and falling. Like there's when he wakes at the end of each thing. So this is the clumsy guy and the pirates thing. And then we come back to, so they leave, and then we have this trickle of water running down this kind of, epic staircase cut out of the mountain. And we see kind of like it's splashing and foaming. And the whole time, Jack the rat is at the edge of the water, kind of looking at the edge of the water, because Jack the rat in reality is sitting on the edge of the bathtub. And so even the placement and the blocking of the characters are still make sense, both symbolically and literally.
Wow.
And so then we continue to see, and it begins to fall off the edge, and you'll see that begins to relate to it traveling down the stairs and turning the corner on the landing and falling down. And remember when he dropped his backpack? So we get a sense of how high he is because of the landmarks that we've been given before.
I love it.
And so the backpack is like one of those things. Is like, oh yeah, remember when he put his backpack down? There's a little sound effect to let us know that this is something you should kind of pay attention to.
And it's interesting because now these become like markers that he has to reach. It's so cool.
Yeah. So we've got the toilet, and notice how this is high, mid, low, and then we just look down at everything that he has to do left. Wow. There's still so much left to go, even though to us, it's like, yeah, you're running downstairs to get a soda from the fridge. It becomes very epic in its cinematic like expanse of like, here's the bathtub. Remember everything that happened there, and then here's, the rat. He's trying to wake him up, and he is collapsed on the staircase. And we still have several levels to go, and through the door, down the hallway, and then down into the basement. And then just, incredible splash pages. They're just fun. And so then we begin to see a little bit more of the collapse and the water. And so we get a shot of the toys again, and the blanket and the quilt. And so we see the ladder, the quilt, the toys, and we see that he has made it through this, took a trip at the bathroom, and has fallen down at the top of the stairs. So he is not very far. And, he's got his gun with him and his rat. He's looking down.
I also like suddenly, like when you're having these, those close-up shots that are from his perspective, the horizon line is tilted. Yeah. Whereas a lot of those shots leading up were like just straight shots. So it kind of destabilizes the viewer. It's really nice.
Yeah. Really, really cool use of Dutch angle, and it teeters. And so you look at like, it's going down this way and down this way and down this way and down this way. Both that lightning pattern, that Z pattern, but also in this case, it happens so frequently that it's almost as if he's like wobbling back and forth.
Yeah, I love it. Wow.
And so then we get a big establishing shot again of kind of this going down the staircase. And I love the use of value contrast here. So we have the idea of the negative space of the water and the bright water against the dark staircase with just a little ridge of light to give us that aspect of stairs.
Yeah.
And it's fairly flat, it's fairly dead on, just a little bit off to the side here. But, we've got the big window to kind of break up that negative space. And we follow the water across into the rain, where we see the introduction of this dog. And so this dog, you might not notice him now, but what I love about this is that, this is another spread where it's like, this is what we have left to do, right? We're still here. We've got to go downstairs. There's the backpack. There's this establishing shot of the backpack for clarity. There's another shot of the backpack as we travel, as the camera travels down the hallway, out the door. There's that backpack again. And then we pull out a little bit more and we see a dog looking at this open door.
I love it. I also love the way that window is placed to pull you up to that top frame. I mean, that's just, the layouts on this are so sophisticated.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to get this book.
I win. Yeah. So then we get, he's still here. What I love about this is that it is so expertly done that we have a guy laying on the ground on top of the stairs for like 6 pages and it hasn't gotten boring yet.
Yeah.
And it really just expands that moment to like the struggle of when he starts to get up and we focus on his hand and his arm and he begins to lift almost in this storyboard manner of where he's like, we see the struggle, the pose here, where he's really struggling, and just the vertigo that you get from like looking down at this angle after seeing him lay there for 8 pages and then struggle to get up. And you're like, holy crap, that becomes a real challenge.
Yeah. And there's a new introduced threat too, right? Like of the water introduced to the whole thing where it's just like, oh boy, like, it's,
so then we're back in the space. And this is a very Wizard of Oz situation. So this is basically the field of poppies, where they start to pass out. They meet these guys. We'll kind of skip past this. This bridge is the landing of the staircase.
Huh.
And so there's this kind of side story that we'll kind of skip by here. They tell the kind of backstory of what's going on, lots of stairs, but notice that we get lots of verticals here and we were getting lots of horizontals before.
And even that window kind of reflects like the window light that was on the wall.
Yeah. Lightning again. So we're gathering our team, cutting back and forth in between like, the hallucination and reality. He gets to his backpack. He's like, there's got to be something that I can use. He's really losing it here. He drops his phone and the phone falls down the stairs. And we've already established that is a really long ways down, right? That he could die before he gets to the bottom of these stairs. And so the fact that he drops his phone is problematic and accentuated by this lightning strike, which also becomes incorporated into the dreamscape as an explosion.
This is phenomenal.
All right, so we'll skip past this part. We'll keep going here. Keep going. There's some air battle. Starting to get lower back into the water again. Skip ahead. All right, and then that dog from like an issue ago, we start to see this dog show up in the doorway. So he was like looking at the open doorway. They're running towards this doorway, and here's this dog that shows up in reality, right? And then they're kind of going through the underground here. They're trying to figure a bunch of stuff out, and we keep getting the shot between, Jack the Warrior and Jack the Rat, and then we just get the threat of the dog, which we knew was coming because it was foreshadowed, so well. And then we get like this shot versus this shot, just to like the distortion of the scale going on. And I just love like the inks where it's like, this doesn't matter. It's like, it's almost like, I don't even want you to look up here. So like speed lines to like draw us in.
Yeah.
The framing.
But it's still not cheating the form either, which is great,
Right. And we get several reference points to like help us in location markers. Here's the rope ladder that was dropped. There's the rope ladder and there's the puddle. And so we still get this idea of like where we are, and we're looking up a little bit into kind of the upper levels of the house. Railing. Big dog fight between Jack and the dog, who is, this hellhound that is guarding the entrance to the basement or to Lord Death in the darkness below. So another little funny nod to kind of the Odyssey and the Iliad. Okay, so you see them kind of fight here, and we'll skip ahead again. Lots more. He gets the phone, which we saw him drop. He makes a phone call. The storm is kind of disrupting everything. Meets a bunch of people. Let me see if there's anything that I want to cover here. skip a lot of this part. So this is where he gets waylaid by the fireplace in this, by this widow who is trying to woo him and all this stuff, and it's all nice and covered in butterflies, and it's like the island with I think it's Circe or the nymph. But then he reads his note that he wrote himself, danger hypo, right at the beginning of the story. And he's like, oh, I got to get out of here. Let's keep going here. Get more callbacks. I love that there's like a car and a horse and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then Superman, Shazam. So we have this big giant epic battle in hell. And, whenever you can have the Shadow, Jean-Luc Picard, Worf, Lobo, Batman, and Superman all fighting the same battle, why not do that? With Optimus Prime and, several others kind of intermixed here. And actually, Optimus Prime, I don't think DC has the rights to Optimus Prime. And so in this comic, this is Ultimus Alpha. All right, so we'll skip ahead here, and we will see the payoff of the staircase in the end. And so this is a very similar shot to the very beginning where we saw the basement as he was walking by, but now there's a shadow. It's scary. He's gotten his soda, but his friends and his hallucination have convinced him not to drink it, so he's still in hypoglycemic shock. And then I said, I love the zip tones. I'm just gonna zoom in on this because I love heavy blacks. And so we'll just kind of go through. You can see the fingerprints.
Yeah, and what's great is like the underlying structure is solid. So every line there is intentional, but it's just like the minimum of detail. But still, he has a real strong mastery of perspective too,
Right. Yeah. And so anyway, so that's the major payoff, I think. And then we get into the basement, and there's kind of a big battle at the end. But that is really what I wanted to cover is the use of architecture and landmarks.
I love it.
If you really lay out.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
I would stop and not let anyone know whether he drinks the soda or not. That way there's incentive for people to.
Well, yeah. And we skipped about 60% of the book, which is worth it as well. But yeah, let's, I think it's time for an adjustment.
I love it. Okay. So let me pull up my thing here. All right. And I'll hop in here. Okay. Actually this, strangely kind of ties in a little bit. So, I mean, this is a children's book, but wait. I am forgetting the copy as well. Let me pull it up. Okay. All right. So, it is time to balance the books. The Indie Review Show is brought to you by Audible. You can get a free audiobook and support this show by going to audibletrial.com/IRS. This week, I'm recommending the Audible original of Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is just a great classic children's book that's a buccaneering pirate adventure and has real stakes for a children's book story, and also is just full of a lot of fun and enjoyment, and has a full cast of voice actors doing it. And I just think the production's really entertaining and cool. And if you're into like fantasy and mystery, you'd really dig it. Also, if you like the book that we're reviewing or any of the books that we're recommending, go to irsagency.com. In fact, a really easy way to support the show is to click on one of the links at irsagency.com before you purchase anything on Amazon. And that'll give us a little kickback, and it doesn't raise the price for you. But yeah, audibletrial.com/IRS. And I highly recommend Treasure Island, which is a classic for a really good reason. All right. Woo.
Cool. So that's the book. I don't even know what to say at this point because I feel like I covered all the stuff that I would steal.
I am I mean, I just say like my impressions are really impressed. I mean, like I think that the art in itself is worth owning. That I think the premise is pretty brilliant. So whether like I mean the premise of we've all seen a premise somewhat similar, but I feel like the idea of kind of highlighting how severe and important that is for somebody with like who's diabetic to
Right.
kind of balance their sugar levels and stuff is super accurate to like friends I've known who've struggled with like really severe diabetes. And they do actually hallucinate too, pretty severely. And so to me, I think that as just a plot device is so brilliant. And the art just, but I think with any other art, like it probably wouldn't have delivered on that level. But yeah,
because when you say, oh yeah, there's this kid that needs a soda and he's got to go down 3 flights of stairs to get it, but he hallucinates while he's on the way down. There's not a lot there.
Yeah.
But then I mean, halfway through that story, you spend more than half of an issue watching this kid lay on the ground in a puddle, and it's so well crafted that the pacing of it is just incredible. And I love how they set the stakes. They consistently, there's a couple landmarks: the backpack and the rope ladder and the toys and the you see the chimney in there as well, and the window and the skylight, and those kind of half a dozen different things really give you a sense of the space, but they also give you a sense of the stakes.
Yeah.
Because, you're like, he's still in the bathroom, like,
yeah,
he's fought all these pirates and this monster and, all this stuff. And really he's been spending this entire time in the bathroom, and it's getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
The way that they set the stakes and the pacing, it just blows me away.
Yeah. And just on a level of like, I mean, you already pointed it out, but it's like so fascinating and cool to see like all the basic rules of comics just like doubled down on, where it's like, okay, you're supposed to use a Z pattern. Like every page in that used a Z pattern, but it didn't feel formulaic, but it's so intentional and so informed, and just the layout, overall, I think that was what blew my mind in there, was just the use of layout. And you're right, repeated themes. Like, you have the same window pattern, you have the same lightning bolts, like stairs. Like there's, you definitely get the sense like the artist sat down and was like, okay, these are going to be my thematic elements that are going to repeat everywhere. It's brilliant. That's amazing. I want to own it.
And they have become almost prohibitively expensive to own a Sean Gordon Murphy page. But there's still some out there that are not terribly expensive. And maybe not today, but because I own some pages from some of his other books, I'll show some original pages when I cover those books. It is well worth like owning original pages of his. I hope that they do more artist editions. They did an artist edition of Punk Rock Jesus, but not in the archival style where it's like a photograph of the page. It's still kind of like cleaned up. But I mean, seeing his actual use of like, you can see where he has scratched the paper with a blade. You can see the use of, like splatter and thumbprint really well. He's an incredible inker. I mean, just a master of inks.
Yeah, dude, he goes from like wet to dry brush, like on every page too. He's just using ink, like every way you can, like loose, tight, like every conceivable. It's very unique and cool. I don't know what else to say either.
and I will say this, and I don't think this is a negative. That's my least favorite Sean Gordon Murphy book.
Yeah, I would say like it doesn't seem to have as much movement of the stuff that you've shown me before. So it which is crazy because it has so much movement, but it's like there's something he does with ink that's so dynamic in some of his other work that almost makes this look tame, which is crazy. I will say also just this won't be the last Dave Stewart book either. It's like 9 times out of 10, if you really like colors in a comic, they tend to be Dave Stewart.
Yeah, he's great. So, so that's that. We're gonna jump into an after party here. So if you guys want to carry over with us, we'll start that up in about 10 or 15 minutes on my channel. And so if you're not subscribed to me, then you can just search Corey Kerr on YouTube and jump over there. But before we head out, Josh, where can we find your stuff?
So you can find my stuff at joshuakemble.com, or you can go to amazon.com. I know it's a weird site, and you can type in this name, 2 Stories, by Joshua Kemble, spelled Kemble, and get yourself a 122 page hand-lettered, hand-inked comic book. That's a confessional graphic memoir that grapples with questions of faith, mental illness, depravity, and ultimately redemption in a fallen world. And if you don't want to get it through Amazon, you can also get it through any independent bookstore, any book retailer pretty much online, and any independent bookstore, you can request them to order it from Ingram.
Yeah. And as always, all of our stuff is on Audible. Trial.com/IRS if you want to get a free audiobook, and affiliate links where it doesn't cost you anymore, and it gives us a kickback at irsagency.com, including upcoming shows where we're going to have more from Josh, and Gary is going to return and do something with us as well. And so make sure to jump on there to get updated on what we're doing. Appreciated a lot of the comments in the chats here. Some really good stuff. People pointing out different things. Gary and Sam and Jim pointing out different things on the colorist and the inks and things like that. So
yeah, I feel like we're going to pamper people with really solid inks, because next week's is Daniel Klaus, who's one of the most solid inkers in the industry. So I think you guys, not everyone's as good as these people.
But we are talking about those that inspire us. So yeah, I
love it.
All right. Okay. irsagency.com. Subscribe, like, thumbs up if you haven't already, and we'll see you guys in a few minutes in the after party.